Hey, future Picassos! I'm Summer. Welcome to my channel. Today, I'm going to share my understanding of splash. The video is my practice drawing the splash. The video was played at triple speed. I will add some instructions on the key steps. Maybe my way isn't the best, but I also hope that this video will be helpful for those of you who want to learn digital painting techniques. Then let's start enjoying the beautiful painting process. Look at the photo footage of the splash. I found that each shower consisted of a main water column combined with a secondary splash. Their shape is immediate and changeable. Because water is a fluid, it has a strong mobility. Use more curves when sketching. Usually curves make us feel softer and softer. It's the same with water. What I've drawn is an S-shaped curve. I also want to practice the water expression of this shape, because when you do character art, this kind of special effect in the form of water, fire, light, and so on is very common. The S shape is used to represent the main water column, with a few small splashes added. When I draw water, I usually draw these little sprays on the edge of the stream. The water flow forms relatively large curves in part due to the action of centrifugal forces. There's gonna be a little splash. This is my understanding. Perhaps there is something wrong. You can correct, because usually when you draw a sketch or a scene design, natural elements are represented in a realistic way. There are no lines, so my sketch only shows the direction and trend of the water flow. Use the lasso tool to quickly draw the main flow area and fill it with a bluish color. I didn't choose the color saturation too high. Too much saturation makes it look cartoonish, so I usually control the saturation of the base color. If the color is not enough, you can adjust it by adjusting the layer. The brightness of the color should also be controlled. Water is a transparent material. If the background color is too dark, the water will appear cloudy. To make the water look clean and clear, it is best to choose a slightly brighter color to draw. Using a round tip with a hard edge, turn off the opacity. Rub the silhouette of the current and think of ways to make more changes. Pay attention to the relationship between points, lines, and surfaces. Give the graphics more rhythm. Water is a natural element, and the shape is more random. What we're going to do here is try to make the flow as irregular as possible. Parts that were too round, parts that used to be flat. Try to find ways to add some variety. It makes the water look more natural. Use a darker blue color to draw the edges of the stream slightly. The main thing is to distinguish the levels of water flow. Water is transparent. Will have a relatively strong light transmission and refraction effect. I want this stream to look thin. Strong transparency at the edge of the water will produce a more obvious contrast between light and dark. It may be a subtle phenomenon, but it is a small trick that can make the water flow clearer. This part of the dark color should also pay attention when painting. Do not stroke completely. Consider the location of the light source. The backlit side can be more obvious. The receiving surface can be represented by line segments or points. It'll look more natural. Drawing water can think of water as a thin sheet form. This is how I understand it. So I'm going to add some flaky surfaces to the longer stream. This also allows for more visual variation in the flow of water. There will be a natural change of light and dark. I also enhance the folded backlight when painting dark colors. What I'm going to do next is add some bright blue to the inside of the stream. Because I used a pure white background. Water is a transparent material. The color of the background should be visible through the current. So I chose a highlight, low saturation blue to paint the changes in the water flow. Of course, An eraser can also be used to erase the transparent area in the middle of the stream. For cleaner colors and easier brushwork, I chose to choose the color to paint. I first stratified the areas with the folding surfaces by contrasting the light and heavy colors. In addition, some bright colored blocks are added to the areas with relatively large block surface areas. This part is simulating water flow relatively thin. Produce a more obvious and transparent look. When drawing, also analyze what kind of structure is the water flow you are drawing. What is his relationship with light and shadow? Water also has volume. Now it's a relatively flat state. Then I added some dark blue to the downward turn. Give more volume to the bottom half of the flow. The overall thickness of this part of the line is similar. I used an eraser to erase a part of the twist. This adds elements to the line property. It also makes this part a little more breathable. The exposed white background also creates more contrast with the added dark colors. Sometimes drawing is a feeling. I just don't feel comfortable doing this. I was editing the video and I thought, why did I do that? We'll think about the pros and cons of this later. After this painting, the volume of the water will become stronger. To make the water look more transparent, I reduced the overall opacity of the water layer a bit. This allows more background colors to filter through. The whole picture is too cold. I wanted more contrast between warm and cold, so a few small red fish were added to the stream. A fish's body is partly in the water and partly in the air, because the water flow has a relatively strong refraction phenomenon. When painting the body of a fish in water, be careful not to link completely with the parts in the air. There should be some misalignment. At the same time, water is fluid. What we're drawing is a stream of water that is pushed upward. Water also has tension inside it, so there are ripples in the water. So when you draw the fish in the water, I chose to represent the fish's body in the form of zigzag lines. At the same time, the color was also selected with a lower saturation of red. So it looks like there's a distinction between fish in the water and fish in the air. I think the color is a little monotonous. I used an overlay layer, added some greenish yellow to the light receiving part of the water flow. A small amount of dark blue was added around the bend and dark parts of the stream. The drawing is light and does not exaggerate the color. The overall relationship is almost drawn. Next, you need to zoom in on the canvas to add more details to the flow. The small picture state already has some feeling of water flow. It's still rough when you zoom in. First, you need to add more variations to the edges of the water that are too smooth. You can use a brush to draw more tiny drops. You can also use an eraser to thin out overly heavy lines. This part requires patience. I'll draw little circles around the edges because a water drop is a roughly circular shape. This can also simulate the state of water droplets when they want to splash. It is also possible to draw some smaller splashing water droplets on the outside. You can draw some irregular point strokes. Be careful not to draw the water droplets as regular circles. When drawing them, because water droplets either splash or fall, they are produced by multiple forces, with forces from different directions. It changes the shape of the water drop. Usually the drops form a kidney shape or a gourd shape. Then we will be patient to complete this part of the refinement. overall effect. I think the color is still a little gray. The clarity of the water is not quite enough. So I used the curve adjustment layer to color the whole stream. First, adjust the curve to a slow S shape in the RGB channel to increase the contrast between light and dark. I don't think the color saturation is enough. So you increase the amount of blue in the blue channel. I moved the curve up a little bit. Some ultramarine blue is added to the light receiving area of the red channel. After this adjustment, the contrast between light and dark water will be enhanced. There is also an increase in color saturation because it's an adjustment to the whole layer. So the original relationship between detail and volume will not be broken. The curved adjustment layer is adjusted by channel. That is, it can increase the contrast of light and darken the picture, and it can also adjust and change the color. It is a good quick adjustment tool. Water does have a smooth surface. Its highlights will also be noticeable. Next, I used a smaller brush. Use pure white to draw the highlights of the water flow and the small ripples in the water flow. I added some white highlights in the form of dots on the small drops around the edges. Some irregular lines were lightly drawn on the smooth surface of the water. Use a light hand when you draw lines. Try to make the lines have uneven fluctuations. The ripples will look more real. The small water droplets splashing around the periphery should also be drawn to highlight and reflect. I also put some whites on the larger ones. Patiently draw the highlights and reflections of each stream. Pay attention to the variation of thickness and length of the lines. picture as a whole, wanted to make the picture more dynamic. More spotty splashes can be added to the periphery of the stream. Just draw dots in a lighter blue color. This will give you the sensation of tiny sprays of water. It also adds layers to the splash. red fish simply make some volume changes, because the main practice is the water material. So I didn't go into too much detail about the fish. Look at our picture. The light in the picture doesn't seem to be enough, so I used a color dodge layer to enhance the light. Wanted more variety in color? I chose a green color for the part that gets the light. You can choose a purple color for the dark parts. Green and purple are neutral colors. It is easier to blend with the colors in the picture. To use a normal layer, adjust the small details in the picture. I mainly used white to add some highlights. At the same time, use the colors already in the picture. The point where the shape transition structure is not clear is strengthened to add a twist to the relationship. A bit of retouching, our splash is finished. Painting water must pay attention to its irregular shape. A splash has the properties of a fluid. The splashing water is accompanied by many small, approximately circular water droplets, and the water highlights are more reflective. We need to use high brightness colors to express its highlights and reflections. If there are paintings of objects in the water, the refraction of water causes objects to deform. These are the things to remember when we draw water. It is also my understanding of the special material of water. Today's sharing is here. I hope you can feel the fun of painting in the process of painting. I will bring more exciting content. Stay tuned.